What if I told you that the conflict you're watching on the news, the tension between Iran and Israel, isn't just about politics or power or oil? What if behind the headlines, behind the missiles and threats, there's something much older, something more ancient than governments, deeper than military alliances, and darker than any news anchor dares to say? You're not going to hear this on CNN, and no, Fox News doesn't go there either. But the Bible does. And tonight, we're going to open it. Not just like a book of faith, but like a classified scroll, a prophetic map written long before any president took office, or any border was drawn in the sand. This isn't about being left or right. This is about being awake. The real story of Iran and Israel didn't start in 1948. It didn't even start in 1979 with the Islamic Revolution. It started in the book of Genesis, in a tent under the stars, when God made a promise to a man named Abraham, a promise that would ignite the most enduring spiritual war in human history. And that war is still burning. You feel it every time headlines flash across your phone. You sense it when Jerusalem is on fire, when Iranian leaders call for the eradication of Israel, when nations take sides. Something inside you whispers, this isn't just politics. And you're right, because this is not a new story. This is prophecy unfolding. And most people, maybe even most Christians, have no idea how deep it goes. Let me ask you a question. Why does Iran, a country over 600 miles away from Jerusalem, care so much about Israel? Why does it obsessively fund proxy militias like Hezbollah and Hamas? Why does it risk sanctions, isolation, even war, just to threaten a sliver of land smaller than New Jersey? The answer isn't military. It's not even ideological. It's spiritual. This is spiritual warfare. Real, biblical, ancient, and deadly. It's not just Iran, it's Persia. And the Bible doesn't just mention Persia, it shows us how God once used Persia to restore Israel, and how the same region is now being stirred by a different spirit. Let me take you back. In the book of Esther, set inside the Persian Empire, we meet a man named Haman. He wasn't just a political figure. He was the embodiment of an ancient hatred, a demonic rage against the people of Israel. Haman didn't just want revenge. He wanted genocide. Esther chapter 3, verse 6 says it plainly. He sought to destroy all the Jews throughout the whole kingdom of Xerxes. Why? Because Israel wasn't just a people. They were a promise. And destroying them meant attempting to destroy the prophecy of the Messiah. Let that sink in. Haman's gallows were not just wooden structures. They were symbols of satanic rebellion, designed to stop the bloodline of salvation. But the irony? Haman died on the very gallows he built. That's not just poetic justice. That's prophecy in motion. Now fast forward 2,500 years. The land once called Persia is now modern-day Iran. And while the names have changed, the spirit has not. The same Haman spirit that wanted Israel wiped out then is breathing today in speeches shouted from Tehran's highest platforms. Death to Israel. You've heard the chant, but have you ever asked why it echoes so loudly? Because Satan hasn't changed his strategy. He still wants to stop the promises of God from being fulfilled. And Israel's existence is proof that God's covenant still stands. That's why the attacks never stop. That's why Iran's leaders can't stop obsessing. It's not just about land. It's about covenant. But here's the twist few people realize. Persia wasn't always the enemy. In fact, the Bible calls a Persian king Cyrus the Great. My anointed in Isaiah chapter 45 verse 1. Yes, God calls a Gentile king who didn't even know him his anointed. Why? Because God used Cyrus to free the Jews from Babylonian captivity and send them back to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple. He didn't just permit it, he funded it. That's not politics, that's prophecy. Isaiah wrote about Cyrus over 100 years before he was born, calling him by name. Imagine that. A pagan king named by God, empowered by heaven to restore a broken nation. If God could do that through ancient Persia, what does it mean when modern Persia, now called Iran, has aligned itself in opposition to the same covenant? It means something shifted, not just geopolitically, spiritually. But that's not the only place the Bible pulls back the curtain. In Daniel chapter 10, we see a scene that should terrify and awaken every believer. Daniel was fasting, praying for 21 days, when an angel finally reached him and said, "The prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days. Wait, what? An angel from God was delayed, not by earthly armies, but by a demonic territorial spirit tied to Persia. That's right. Behind kingdoms are principalities. And behind Persia stood a spiritual resistance so fierce, it took Michael the archangel to break through. This is not metaphor. This is biblical intelligence about how real spiritual warfare works behind the scenes of empires. And if Persia had a demonic prince then, do you think the same spirit is silent now? Look at Iran today, still opposing Israel, still threatening Jerusalem, still carrying a rage that no negotiation seems to calm. And yet the Bible is not silent about where this all leads. In Ezekiel chapter 38, we read about a final confrontation, a coalition of nations rising against Israel. Among them, Persia. Yes, Ezekiel names Persia directly, and it's not alone. It's joined by Gog and Magog, a mysterious northern force that scholars believe could point to modern-day powers like Russia or Turkey. The Bible doesn't say maybe. It says Persia will march, but it also says God will respond. God won't sit this one out. In Ezekiel chapter 38, verses 18 through 22, it says, when Gog and its allies, including Persia, come against Israel, God himself will rise in fury. He won't just send armies, he'll shake the ground beneath their feet. He'll rain down fire, flood the skies with hail, and confuse the minds of generals. It will be so overwhelming. The world will know this was not Israel's military genius. It was the hand of the Almighty. So when Iran issues threats, when its proxies fire rockets into Jerusalem, when the world shrugs and says, it's just another cycle of violence, understand this. It's a setup, not by man, by God. Because prophecy doesn't play out on our timeline. It unfolds on his. And while the nations rage, he is positioning every player for the final act. Let's zoom back into something that almost no one talks about. Something buried in the shadows of Scripture. Something that may be the most direct prophecy about modern-day Iran. And it's not found in Ezekiel. It's in Jeremiah chapter 49. You've probably never heard this preached. Most churches skip right over it. But in verses 34 to 39, God speaks directly to a nation called Elam, an ancient kingdom in what is now southwestern Iran. And what does God say? I will break the bow of Elam, the mainstay of their might. I will scatter them to the four winds. This wasn't political. This was judgment. God declared destruction over Elam, not for land disputes, but for spiritual rebellion. But don't miss this. After judgment, God makes a shocking promise. Yet I will restore the fortunes of Elam in the latter days, declares the Lord. Jeremiah chapter 49, verse 39. Wait, what? The same nation he judged. He will restore? Yes, because this isn't just a story of wrath. It's a story of redemption. That's the mystery of God. He breaks, but he restores. He judges, but he redeems, even in Iran. And believe it or not, It's already begun, right now. Beneath the radar of the media, under the iron grip of a hostile regime, there's a revival stirring in Iran. That's right. The fastest growing underground church in the world is in Iran, not in mega churches, not with stages or lights, but in whispers, in living rooms, in dark rooms behind locked doors. People are having dreams of Jesus, opening secret Bibles, risking everything to follow Yeshua. Young women in veils, former Islamic radicals, people who once shouted, "Death to Israel," are now whispering, "Jesus is Lord." Why? Because God hasn't forgotten Persia. Because the same land that once birthed Cyrus the Great, that once helped rebuild Jerusalem, is not beyond the reach of grace. Let that shake you. While the world fears Iran's nuclear program, while analysts count warheads and debate sanctions, heaven sees souls. God sees a field, not just of threats, but of harvest. What if the greatest threat from Iran isn't its missiles, but the revival that could erupt if the church dares to pray? What if the real showdown isn't in military bunkers, but in living rooms filled with secret worship? The media won't tell you this, but heaven's scrolls already did. And here's where it gets personal. Remember Esther? She was just a girl, hidden in the palace of Persia, raised in silence, no platform, no army, no title. Until the moment came, her people were marked for extinction. The gallows were built, and the decree had been signed. But she didn't stay silent. She risked everything. She stepped into the throne room. She stood between death and her people. Why? Because God placed her in Persia for such a time as this. Now hear me. God is raising up modern-day Esthers even now. In Iran, in Israel, in America. People like you, not to panic, but to intercede. Because the spirit of Haman is not dead. It's still breathing hatred, still building gallows. But so is the Spirit of God, still turning the enemy's plans inside out, still raising vessels in obscurity, still protecting the covenant. Esther didn't just save her generation. She pointed to a pattern. When the enemy plots annihilation, God raises intercessors. When Satan schemes in silence, God answers through surrendered voices. When Iran rises in rage, God raises a remnant in prayer. And now, we come to the part the enemy fears most, the part he hopes you never realize. This war, it's not just about land, or borders, or nuclear deals. It's about Jerusalem. Yes, that small city, barely 50 square miles, the size of a suburb in Texas, is the center of prophecy. Why? Because it's where the king is returning. Zechariah chapter 12 says, "I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling unto all the people round about, though all the people of the earth all be gathered together against it. Jerusalem will be surrounded, attacked, and shaken, and yet God will fight for her, not with drones, but with divine fire." Don't let the size of Jerusalem fool you. She's not just a city. She's a target, a trigger, and a throne. Every missile aimed at her, every vote cast against her, every plot to divide her. It's not about strategy. It's about spiritual defiance. Because Jerusalem is God's clock. The enemy knows when Jerusalem rises, the countdown begins. And so, he rages. Iran knows this too. And behind the threats, behind the speeches, behind the marches in Tehran chanting, "Death to Israel," there is something deeper, the fear of prophecy coming true. That's why the attacks come, not to destroy a nation, but to delay a promise. But here's the thing, God's promises can't be delayed forever, because behind Jerusalem there is a throne. And on that throne is a king, and he is not silent. Let's go deeper. In Revelation chapter 12, the Apostle John gives us a vision, one that many Christians overlook. It's the image of a woman clothed with the sun, standing on the moon with a crown of 12 stars. That woman is Israel, and she's being hunted by a dragon, Satan himself. This isn't a fairy tale. It's prophetic reality. The dragon tries to devour her child, the Messiah. When he fails, he goes after the woman and her offspring, those who obey God and hold to the testimony of Jesus. This isn't just spiritual symbolism. It's a playbook. Satan couldn't stop Jesus, so now he tries to stop Israel and those who stand with her. That's why Iran's rage is more than national. It's demonic. That's why anti-Semitism never dies. It just changes languages and flags. It wore Pharaoh's crown. It wore Haman's robe. It wore Caesar's laurel. It wore Hitler's uniform. And now, it hides behind political correctness, religious extremism, and international diplomacy. But the Bible saw it all coming, and it warned us to watch. Jesus himself said it in Matthew chapter 24 and Luke chapter 21. He didn't give us soft words. He gave us signs. Nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. Jerusalem will be surrounded. There will be earthquakes, famines, wars, and rumors of wars. Sound familiar? And then he said, when you see these things begin to happen, look up, for your redemption draws near. Look up, not look away. Not scroll endlessly through social media. Not numb out with entertainment. Look up, because when Israel is trembling, prophecy is awakening. And here's where you come in. You were born for this hour. You're not just watching history. You're standing at the edge of prophecy. And you have two choices. You can either live like this is all coincidence, or you can realize you've been called for such a time as this. Like Esther, you didn't choose this moment, but God chose you for it, to watch, to pray, to speak, to stand, because what you do in this moment matters. There are battles happening right now that the news will never cover. Battles over nations, battles over souls, battles over destiny, and some of the fiercest are being fought in silence, in your prayer room, in your heart, in your daily decisions. You may not feel like a warrior. You may not be in Israel. You may not understand everything about the Middle East. But if you know how to pray, if you know how to stand on God's word, if you know how to discern the times, then you are part of this story. Because Iran may be planning its next move. World powers may be negotiating treaties, but heaven is writing a different ending. And in that ending, Gog and Magog rise, but they fall. The enemies of God surround Jerusalem, but they're broken. The world watches in shock, but the remnant watches with understanding, because we saw it in the Word, before we saw it in the world. So here's what you need to do. Stop scrolling past the headlines like they're just noise. Start seeing them for what they are. Signals. Don't get swept up in politics. Don't get caught in division. Don't let fear win. Instead, watch, pray, speak truth. Share this message with someone who thinks this is all just about land, oil, old grudges. It's not. It's about prophecy. It's about covenant. It's about a war older than nations and a God stronger than empires. Let's be clear. This war isn't coming. It's already here. Not with tanks lining borders or headlines screaming World War III. It's subtler. It's quieter. But it's just as real. It's in the halls of diplomacy, where deals are made to divide Israel. It's in the UN votes, where Jerusalem is treated like a political pawn instead of holy ground. It's in the classrooms, where generations are taught to erase history, blur truth, and despise covenant. And it's in the church, where many have fallen asleep, too afraid to speak, too distracted to discern, too comfortable to care. But God is raising a remnant, a people who will not bow to fear, who will not water down the word, who will not be silent while prophecy unfolds. You are part of that remnant. You don't need a pulpit. You don't need a platform. You need eyes to see, ears to hear, and a heart willing to say, "Here I am, Lord, send me." Because make no mistake, the spirit of Haman is active. It hides in anti-Israel rhetoric. It disguises itself as human rights. It twists facts and history to make Israel the villain and Persia the victim. But behind the smoke is an ancient hatred, a hatred that remembers the seed that crushed the serpent's head, a hatred that knows the return of Jesus is tied to Jerusalem, not Washington, to prophecy, not politics. And that's why the enemy rages. But here's the part no one tells you. The gallows are being rebuilt, but so is the deliverance. Just like in Esther's day, the enemy will hang on the very thing he prepared for God's people. Now I want to speak directly to you, the watcher, the listener, the seeker. Maybe you felt overwhelmed. Maybe the chaos of the Middle East has seemed too complex, too far away, too controversial. But deep down, you've known this matters. Why? Because what happens in Jerusalem shakes the nations. Because what's happening in Iran is part of a pattern. Because you are alive in a prophetic moment. Not by accident, but by assignment. So don't sit this one out. Be like Daniel, who fasted while empires shifted. Be like Esther, who stood when silence was safer. Be like Cyrus, who obeyed even before he understood. Be like the church in Iran, who worships behind locked doors and risks death for the name of Jesus. And remember this, there are spirits that don't die when empires fall. There are hatreds that survive treaties, truces, and time. But there is one king who reigns above it all, and his word is unfolding, line by line, name by name, nation by nation. He has not forgotten his promise to Israel. He has not lost sight of the remnant in Iran. He has not abandoned his people, and he has not finished his story. Now, it's time for you to respond. If this message stirred something in your spirit, don't keep it to yourself. Here's what you can do right now. Leave a comment below. What stood out to you? What's God showing you through this? Your words might wake someone else up. Share this video with your small group, your church, your social media, your family. The media won't say this, but maybe your share is the voice someone needs. Watch our other videos. We've covered every book of prophecy, every king of Israel, and every hidden connection from Genesis to Revelation. You can dive deeper, ad-free through our full library, linked below. Support this channel. If this content feeds your spirit, help us keep it going. Partner with us to bring biblical truth where the mainstream refuses to go. Let's build a generation that watches and prays. Let's raise voices that speak truth, no matter how dark it gets. Let's believe that even in Iran, even in chaos, God is still writing redemption, because this isn't just another headline. This is the unfolding of prophecy, and you were born for this hour. Stay bold, stay awake, and stay in the Word. We'll see you in the next video.